Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTubers. Yeah. Exercise the tongue before trying to read. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, fellow friends and YouTubers out there. Alright. Looks like we might have some people coming here finally. Stone Kingdom of Yahweh. Look them up. Be interesting. Can you imagine sitting around a campfire instead of just this sitting around the electric thing there? I'd like to have, I like that just kind of ambiance, I think everybody likes it. I don't know. But anyway, sit around a real campfire with a bunch of intelligent people that, know that something's going to happen and make plans for it, do some brainstorming after reading a chapter 2 or 3 of this. Yeah, it's going to be fun. When the alarm went off at 8:30, chapter 8. All right. I read this once already and it didn't take, and it's just frustrating. I had more stress on my voice, and I closed my bottle up already, and I'm going to need it. When the alarm went off at 6:30, and I don't have the headset on. Okay. Pause. When the alarm went off at 6:30, Mark was already awake. He had slept fitfully. He lay in bed and looked through the vent in the roof of the camper for a moment. The sky was just starting to turn pink. What day was it? The burst hit on Tuesday, so today was Thursday. It was hard to believe how much had transpired in less than 48 hours. He got out of bed, put on his jeans, and went into the house. He found a pair of running shorts, a t-shirt, and his running shoes with the help of a flashlight. He dressed and then headed out the door. After stretching his back and calves, he began to run. He thought about what they would need if they decided not to go stay at the ranch. He didn't see a way they could amass the resources they'd need to survive here if the power didn't come back on quickly. Even with Jim's help, there was no way to buy and do even the minimum. If the lights weren't on in a few days, the only logical choice would be to join Mr. Davis's group. Mark really wanted to believe that the power would be back on, but he was finding it more and more difficult. There was something in what the president said last night that didn't seem quite right. Mark didn't know exactly what it was, but something was telling him the lights wouldn't be back on anytime soon. Maybe he was just getting paranoid. He glanced over his shoulder and then laughed to himself. His thoughts turned to other things. His karate class was supposed to have been last night. Of course they didn't have it. The lights were out and the school was locked up. Mark missed it. The best part of the martial arts to him was teaching. Seeing a kid who thought he couldn't suddenly began to think I can was so rewarding. He was approaching the half-mile mark, and if he wanted to run just a mile, he would turn around here and run back home, but he thought, I don't have to go to work just a little further. A tenth of a mile further, he was at the entrance to Silver Hills. Good morning, Adam, he said to one of the guards. Good morning, Mark. Nice morning for a run, huh? I think so. He had met the other guard last night, but couldn't remember his name. How's it going for you this morning? Pretty good, the man answered. Mark wondered whether to turn east or west for about half a second. He turned east to be able to see the sunrise. Too bad they didn't have some solar panels. With them and a battery bank, they could at least have some light in the house. Maybe they could find some 12-volt ceiling fans. Did they even make such a thing? If they did, he'd bet they had them at the ranch. The more he thought about it, the more he knew they had to go. But how would he convince the women? Wait, he didn't have to. The lists would. They would see that it was hopeless to stay here. By the time he realized it, he must have been over 2 miles from the house. Even on his long runs, he didn't usually go over 3 miles, and he had missed the sunrise. He was sure he'd seen it, but he couldn't remember. He turned around and started running back. What was he going to do about Sam? David seemed to be taking it all in stride, but he could care less about going to school. And many of his friends lived here in the subdivision. Sam was a social animal. She had lots of friends, and they lived all over. He needed to get her involved in something, but what? He would talk to Jess about it. What of the rest of his family? His parents, brother, and one of his sisters and their families lived in Waco. Would they be safe where they were? What about Jess's sister in California? What about Lisa's folks and Jim's mom and his brother? Mark shook his head. Running was supposed to make things clearer for him. This time he ended up with more questions than answers. Mark could just make out the Silver Hills sign ahead. He quickened his pace a little. When he turned into the subdivision, he waved at the guards as he passed. It was slightly uphill to his house from here. His calves were burning, but he put his head down and picked up his pace a little more. Perhaps the answers could be found in pushing himself harder. When he turned the corner, he broke into a sprint. Harder, he thought, but no answers came as he pushed himself. When he reached the front of the house, he looked at his watch. It said 7:34. He walked to the corner and back to cool down. He must have run close to 5 miles. Surprisingly, he didn't feel that tired. He stretched some more to cool down. Mark got some clean clothes out of the house and went back out to the camper to shower. When he got out, Jess was frying up the eggs Manny had given them. Jim and Lisa were up, but all of the kids except for Sam were still asleep. They all sat down at the picnic table to eat breakfast. Mark noticed that the yolks on these eggs were much darker than the eggs they bought at Kroger. They also tasted better. As they ate, they talked about what they each wanted to get accomplished for the day. Jess wanted to start working on a curriculum for Sam and David. She said they would need it whether they stayed here or went to the ranch. Lisa wanted to get to the grocery store with the list and she and Jess had made the night before. Sam asked if she could go with Lisa, who said she would be glad to have the company. Lisa asked Jim if he'd work with the twins on their math this morning. She told the others that Jim always had more success with the girls on math than she did because their brains worked the same way. Mark wanted to go pay for the glow plug controller, go to the hardware store for the plug to the dryer, and maybe run by the gun store for some ammo. It was decided that Mark, Lisa, and Sam would go to town, and Jim and Jess would hold down the fort, quote unquote. The three shoppers loaded up in Mark's truck and headed to town. They first stopped at the hardware store. It was a small, independently owned store that had been run by the same family for almost 60 years, and the store looked like it hadn't changed much in that time. Mark found the plug he needed to replace the one he had stolen from the dryer. The girls wandered off to look through the store. Sam found Mark and pulled him over to where Lisa was looking at some kerosene lamps. "Look, Mark," Lisa said, "they have kerosene lamps and lanterns. They also have big tubs and washboards. If the power doesn't come back on and we stay at your place, we're going to have to come back here." "Boy, I hope it doesn't come down to washing our clothes with washboards," Samantha said. "That would be cruel and unusual punishment. And the Constitution prohibits that, doesn't it? Besides, we have the generator that'll run the washer, right, Dad?" "Yes, it will, but I don't think we'll be able to spare the gas to wash clothes for very long." Mark paid for the plug and they headed to the gun store. When they got there, Mark was a little surprised that it was closed. The Watson family ran the store, and it wasn't like them to close. The mom and dad had started their business in the early 1960s, and both sons now worked at the store. Jerry ran the front, and Tony was an excellent gunsmith. He'd been taught by his father and now ran the back of the store. Perhaps Mark would run by Jerry's house later and see if everything was okay. When they got to the Kroger, there was a line to get in the store. All three in the truck wondered what was going on. Mark parked the truck out in the parking lot a ways, as was his custom. It could be very difficult getting the long truck out of a parking space if people parked too close. They got out and walked up to the entrance. When they got to the door, there was a table with one of the managers sitting behind it. Standing next to him was a San Antonio police officer. The manager explained that they'd had a run on the store when the lights went out, and that since they didn't know when they would be resupplied, they were limiting each family to $50 worth of groceries. He told them the store was only accepting cash or public assistance cards. He asked for one of their IDs. Mark handed the man his driver's license. The manager looked at it and opened a notebook to the T's. He looked for Turner, and at each one he found, he compared the address to the one on Mark's license. When he didn't find a match, he wrote Mark's name and address down in the book. He gave Mark a number and told him that when his number was called, a sales associate would take them through the store with a flashlight and add up their items on a calculator. Mark informed the manager that he'd also brought Lisa to the store, and she had her own family. He checked and recorded Lisa's license and gave her a number 2. Then they went and stood in line. Lisa pulled out the list and started numbering the items on it by importance. When she got to the point where she knew she was over $100, she got a piece of paper out of her purse and wrote a new list, and then scratched them off the original. She gave the new list to Mark and told him to get as far down it as he could. It took almost 45 minutes before their numbers were called. Mark went with his assigned associate, and Sam elected to go with Lisa. It didn't take Mark long to reach $50. He was able to get most everything Elisa had put on the list. The associate took him to the front of the store, and he paid in cash as they bagged his groceries. It was only a minute or two until Lisa and Sam were done paying for their food. They put all the bags into one basket and pushed it toward the truck. When they got there, Mark opened the back door and they started stacking the groceries on the floorboard of the back seat. As they were unloading the basket, Mark noticed 3 scruffy-looking guys walking past the truck toward the store. His radar went up a little, but once the men passed the truck, Mark felt better. He realized that he too probably looked a little scruffy. After all, it had been 2 days since he'd shaved. Once the groceries were loaded, the girls got into the truck, and Mark pushed the basket over to the cart corral. When he turned to go back, the 3 men were standing between the truck and him. Mark's senses went into overdrive. He looked at the truck. The girls had the doors closed and, he hoped, locked. His .45 was also in the truck. He looked side to side, but there was no one else this far out in the parking lot. He felt trapped with the corral right behind him, so he stepped to his left enough so that he could back up if needed to. He looked at the 3 men. The one on the left was tall and muscular. The middle one was average height and skinny, and the one on the right was moderately overweight. The middle one spoke to Mark. "Hey, mister, what's the deal with the long line to get into the store?" Mark tried to answer in a natural voice. "Oh, they're only letting everyone have $50 worth of groceries. The employees take you through the store with flashlights." Mark was waiting for some kind of reply when he saw the knife in Skinny's hand. He took half a step back. They were too close for him to get his little pistol out of his back pocket. He figured his best option if he had to fight was to use his hands and try to create enough space to bring his gun to bear. When Skinny saw that Mark had seen the knife, he extended it toward Mark's midsection. "Listen up, asshole. Give us the keys to the truck and no one gets hurt." Tubby stuck his hand out toward Mark for the keys. Mark thought that the truck and the groceries weren't worth getting killed for, but he also knew that if these guys had a gun, they'd be using it. He had no intention of providing them with one by letting them have his Colt that was in the truck. Most importantly, what might these criminals do to Lisa and Sam? Mark reached into his left front pocket and pulled out his office keys. He figured that if he dropped them, Tubby might bend over to pick them up, and he could kick him into Knife Boy. Mark reached his hand out toward the carjackers, praying they wouldn't notice that the keys weren't car keys. He dropped the keys right in front of the man with the knife. At that instant, everything seemed to go into slow motion. The man's eyes got wide with anger, and he lunged at Mark's stomach with the knife. "You He started to scream, but wasn't able to finish. When he lunged, Mark thrust his hands forward and grabbed the man's knife or hand around the wrist. At the same time, he pulled his hips back to get his midsection as far away as possible from the knife. Mark stepped to his left and jerked the man's arm past him. The knife wielder, with his weight going forward from his own thrust, went flying by with the assistance of Mark pulling him, and he landed face first on the asphalt. The big man to Mark's left stepped in and badly telegraphed a right-handed haymaker. Mark stepped inside the punch and brought his arms up to intercept the man's arm. When the punch was stopped, Mark ducked under and slid his right hand down to the man's wrist and grabbed. The palm heel of his left slammed into the back of the attacker's elbow. The arm bent back the wrong way and the man howled. Mark then sidekicked to the man's knee. With the adrenaline pumping, he kicked too high and it landed in the man's thigh, knocking him down. Mark looked back and Knife Boy was still down on all fours groaning. He changed his focus to the last man. Tubby was standing wide-eyed and frozen. When Mark looked at him, a dark stain appeared in the crotch of his jeans. Mark backed up toward the truck and pulled the Kel-Tec out of his pocket and pointed it in the direction of the 3 men. Tubby, seeing this, took off at a pace that could have set a world record. The other 2 looked at Tubby and then, seeing why he was running, did their best to catch up with him. Mark was still pointing the pistol at the men, even after they were well out of range. Even though he'd been in karate for 6 years and had his concealed handgun license for 4, this was the first time he'd ever had to defend himself. He stood there shaking from the adrenaline dump. Sam rolled down the window of the truck. Dad? 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 Yes, Mark finally answered. Time sped back up to normal. Are you okay? Yes, I think so. Dad, you were so awesome. I was so scared, but you kicked butt. I know we practice that stuff in karate, but seeing you go full speed, I never thought it would be that effective. Honey, I never thought it would be either, but thank God it is. Let me check you to make sure you're not injured, Lisa said. She looked Mark over and could not find any injuries. Did you even get hit? I don't think so. What do we do now? Lisa said. I guess I should go make a report with that policeman at the entrance, Mark said, as he put the .32 back into his pocket. The trio got into the truck and Mark drove up to the entrance. He pulled the truck up to the curb and got out. Hey, buddy, you can't park there, the policeman admonished. I was just attacked out in the parking lot, Mark informed him. Are you okay? What did they get? Yes, I'm all right, and they didn't get anything. Mark finished telling the policeman what had happened. Did you shoot them? The policeman asked. No, I didn't even fire a shot, but I dislocated one guy's elbow, and the other guy could have fallen on his knife. Can I see your CHL, the officer requested. Mark started to reach for his wallet with his left hip pocket and paused. I'm just getting my wallet. He wanted to make sure the policeman was at ease. I understand. The policeman took out a little notebook from his breast pocket and wrote down Mark's name and CHL number. He then gave Mark back his license. Okay, I wrote down your name and address in case we have any questions. Aren't you going to make a formal report? Mr. Turner, if these times were normal, yes, I would take a formal report. Under the circumstances, though, I won't. The PD is swamped. You didn't get hurt, nothing was stolen, and the three guys who tried to attack you only got what was coming to them. You should be thanking God and your training that things went so well for you. I have your information if anything comes up. Go home, and next time, watch your six better. Thank you, officer, I will. With that, Mark got back into the truck. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely find first gear. Second time around, and I hope it takes.